Tried to weigh me down, crabs in a barrel. Wanna take my crown, renegade. I'm lighting up the way, I'm inspired. On the trail of life.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Power Table, conversations for Black women. I am excited about the second season. We are bringing you Black women throughout the state who are going to share their brilliance, their beauty, about the issues that are important to us and about us. So sit back, stay tuned, and enjoy the show. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Power Table, conversations for Black women. Okay, today is going to be an interesting day because we have our first male, and I thought it would be appropriate to bring somebody that I'm extremely close to, to have this conversation about. I oftentimes, so let me first introduce him. This is Richard Harrison. He is the founder of Kingdomhood, which is a more than a brand. It is a kind of a focus on Black males and building kingdoms with a kind of twist around our hood, right?
That's right.
Lifting up kings in our hood.
Correct.
All right. So, Mr. Richard.
Yes, ma'am.
We have been having this conversation, you know, the collective, California Black Women's Collective is all about Black women, uplifting Black women and girls.
That's correct.
And oftentimes I get asked, what about the men? and my first reaction to that is like, yeah, what about the men? You know, because I recognize as a mom of two sons that I'm raising men. But the other part that I recognize is in raising those men is I've had people come into the space to teach them about manhood, like yourself, and my grandfather and my brother, because there were certain things I couldn't teach them, and I recognize that as a mother, and I appreciate that. But in the space that I'm in, we went to the convention. The Democratic Convention, and also went to the Congressional Black Caucus, and the absence of Black men really, you know, concerned me because I don't think this is a journey of either or. I think this is a journey of in addition to.
That's correct.
So, you know, first let's start with, tell us a little bit about why you started Kingdomhood and the need to have something like Kingdomhood.
Yeah, so it kind of started on the backdrop of the George Floyd murder, and I really saw men Black men particularly in a kind of like this matrix where they were lost. They didn't know how to feel about America, whether it be the public political stream, whether it be into socioeconomics, whether it be into business, whether it be just in our communities. And there was really no type of group that really came together and said, hey, you are kings.
Right.
And this is the pathway that we're going to create to help you become a king, whether it be economical, whether it be education, whether it be pulling our dollars together as far as investing and creating a system, creating a neighborhood that's safe for us. So that's kind of my concept.
All right. So like creating your own ecosystem.
Yeah, own ecosystem.
Focused similar to the collective,
right?
Exactly. The Black Women's Collective.
Yeah.
So this is political season.
Yeah.
One of the craziest times of all years. And obviously we're a nonprofit, so we don't lean on either side when we're talking in the politics. But really walk me through, it's been so much talked about Black men and where they are and where they're going to stand in this election. You know, first help me understand, like, where are Black men?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I think when it comes to politics, I think for the most part, Black men are really disillusioned and disconnected because we don't feel that the politicians are talking to us when it's not voting season. Now, you look on voting season now, you got all these advertisements. You got every politician, you know, popping out of the woodwork saying, vote for me, I can do this. But when it's not election season, they don't see them in the communities. You know, I would say another thing is communication to Black men is very important. You need to speak to our heart.
How do you do that?
Well, you speak to the issues that impact us.
Okay, like?
Like, for example, jobs. Number one thing on a Black man's, you know, his purview is jobs, right? And because we are so tied to our checking account, our egos are very fragile and shallow and misguided. I don't feel like a man if I'm not making money.
You said that, not me.
When you're sitting on the hot seat, you got to keep it real.
Right.
It is. And if we don't have jobs, we're not thinking about politics. And so we're kind of disconnected. And also the way you communicate as far as the method, right? How they communicate, a commercial, or they send you, some flyers, or they send you a publication with a bunch of in black and white.
Right.
We're on our phones.
Right.
Right. Our lowest voting block is from 18 to 35. They only vote at 35%. 78% of black men are on Instagram.
Really?
These measures should be on Instagram.
Right.
Politicians should be on Instagram to reach that audience.
Right. And so when you think about, you said, how you communicate, but messaging.
Messaging.
And so messaging, okay, jobs. So we know that because jobs are important to everybody. But like, what would you suggest that the politicians or any group, whether it's a company or anything, because we're seeing just like almost like black men not being in the forefront anymore. So what type of messaging, outside of, talk about our pocketbooks, what type of messaging would resonate the best with black men?
First of all, letting them know you care about us, and not just because you want to solicit our vote. We wake up every morning and we see these communities that tell us that we're not successful. Whether it be the way they look,
right?
The way we see it, the look and feel of our cities, are not up to par. So you get up like, wow, man, this particular politician is over this city. Look how it's looking. Why am I going to waste my time, listening to him or talking to them?
Because your experience is, I'm living like this, and you're telling me you're doing some work for me.
Correct.
On my behalf.
Correct.
What work?
And we don't see it. So I think politicians really have to say, listen, if you elect me, I'm talking about town halls. I'm talking about in the barbershop conversations. I'm talking about saying, black men, I hear you. I see you. I see your community. I understand what your struggles are. And these are my particular policies that are going to directly help you get to that next level and get to this city the way you want to be. And you guys are able to take care of your families.
Now, I've heard you say, and you say this all the time, you believe 50% is personal responsibility.
Correct.
So what is the responsibility of the brother?
Great question. So I did a podcast called No Country for Lazy Black Men. And I got a lot of pushback, but that's my personal responsibility part is what are we doing? The politicians in our neighborhood, may not be doing everything, but who is my county supervisor? Like for Holly Mitchell, do I know who she is and what she does? Have I called her? Who is my mayor? Who is my city councilman? Am I going to the city councilman meetings? Am I calling them saying, hey, you gonna fix this or we gonna vote you out?
Right.
Am I as a over 55 black male, am I wrapping my arms around the lower voting block, say you need to vote for these reasons? Because in my voting block, we're voting over 60%.
Right.
So there's a gap between us.
The 35%.
We're not
and the
mentoring
60,
them.
Right.
We're not mentoring them.
Right. But we're seeing that also. That's not different in black women. We're seeing that same dynamic in black women. We're seeing that black women over a certain age are more likely to be engaged than some of the young sisters. And so when, this goes back to, our story is not that different.
Right.
It's just our effort may be different. And so when we think about, how we can bring us back together, again, it shouldn't be in addition to, it shouldn't be either or, it should be in addition to. What would you recommend that black women, you're hearing black women, is leading this and black women's leading that. But first, let me ask this. How does that make black men feel?
Well, I think that we're not leading in the workplace. So then in our relationships at home, we don't feel like leaders either. Because listen, black women are the most educated sector. You guys are making more in aspects to the white dollar than black men are. You guys opened up more businesses than we have. So you guys are doing it. And I love that fact you guys are doing it because you had to. Because we were missing. We were had the drug issue. We were being locked up in large numbers. So we were out of the home. And I think that we, for the most part, feel that black women are doing better than us and they're more successful than us. So it taps into lowers our self-esteem in a certain way. We feel like, man, they're more successful now. They're successful in the worst place, and now they're successful in the house. Where do I fit in their life? Now, what kind of?
But isn't that really a narrative?
It is.
Because actually,
It is.
Not to correct you, but black men make more closer to white males than black women do.
Mm-hmm.
Black men make a little bit more than black women as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So,
As a whole, okay. Okay.
you know, so we make
64 cents, right?
no. That's national. I only deal with
Oh,
California.
you doing local? Okay, you doing local? Okay, I got you.
Well,
You're
even
right.
nationally, it's
Right.
still the same data point.
Right.
And black women are more likely to be head of household in
Correct.
the primary. And this is, but that doesn't, by saying that does not mean that black men are not part of the family or part of children's lives.
Correct.
It just
No.
means that
We're just
black
not
women
in the home.
are just not, we're taking care of the home
Not
by
in the home.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Correct. That's correct.
And so, how do we figure this out? Meaning, I don't need you in my home to still be my partner,
Correct.
right? How do we figure it out
Okay.
together? How do
Right.
we figure it out?
Right. Because right now we know there's a stone wall between black men and women.
Right.
And here's the personal responsibility part: is black men, we need to do better in how we approach our women, right? And we seem to find a safe space in every other race except black women. When black women have done the most for us, they've carried us. I mean, we are thus far because of you guys. But for some
I agree.
but for some reason we don't see that value. We have
Right.
this negative paradigm where if I'm with a black woman, she will
Right.
be telling me what to do, how to do it, where to
We
go.
will. I mean,
Okay.
that's why. but I mean, we're no different than we're no different than any other woman. I mean, all
Right.
women tell their men. I remember when I worked in corporate America, I would say, "Hey, are you going to that blah 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 blah" to my white male boss, and he would say, "Well, I have to call boss lady and see what she says."
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this notion that black women, are more bossy or all that kind of stuff. That's like so not true.
I agree.
Women are
I agree.
nah. You and I used to have arguments about this. And
Like what?
We used to talk about, you used to say, well, you don't know how to let a man be a man.
Correct.
And I would say, I'm just being me. Like that wasn't really received the way, like you could sit here and be saying all these political correct because all these women gonna be watching.
Exactly.
And you don't want them to come looking for you.
No, I don't. Look,
'cause
Yvonne Wheeler crucified me for a T-shirt. I can imagine if I say something wrong.
Right. But what's the real deal though? I mean,
Okay.
how do we as cohabitants on this earth as brothers and sisters build together, particularly in the political space?
Well, I think that black women see the value in politics. Black men, for the most part, don't.
Okay.
Because
Fair.
Because we just don't see the value in it. And I will hold accountable the older black men because we turn out in large numbers than the lower voting population. So we need
younger.
Younger voting population. So we actually need to put our arms around them and say, this is why you vote. This is what I saw in the 80s and 90s. People that are older than me, this is what we saw during the civil rights movement. Because we're kind of like high emotional, high impact voters. So like, for example, we turned out in large numbers during the civil rights movement. We turned out in large numbers against when Barack Obama got elected. So if it's not sexy and big, we just don't turn out. So our local races who are so important, we don't see the galvanized, we don't see the importance in it, and we just don't turn out. But it's up to us as older black men to say, hey man, you need to vote. Your local election, the national is one thing, but locally is very important.
How did you have been criminal justice system impact.
Yeah.
And we know that impact has really discouraged individuals from being part of the political process, whether you're in states that basically say you can't vote.
Yeah.
If you have been system impacted, or you are in places like California that says everybody, you get a chance to vote, even if you are there without charges and yet you just can't make bail. You still have the ability to vote. How do we touch that population to let them know in California you have voting liberties that the national narrative is different, but we need you to know locally that you can have the right to vote.
Right. Well, there has to be some type of storytelling. It has to come from black men who have been in the system and who have made it out, and because of certain political advantages that of voting and certain politicians that helped us move out of that system and move into the mainstream and be successful. So, like myself, I catch brothers that are coming out of the system. And I say, hey, man, I vote, and this is why I vote. When I came out of the system, the current administration had the JTPA. I was able to get in that program, do the work, and it paid for my Microsoft engineering certification. So it turned my life around. That's because we had the right people in place, and that kind of really gave me I want to vote from now on because this is why it works. So when they hear stories from people like me, they're more apt to do it. Otherwise, they're like, why should I vote?
Right. Nobody is listening.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
That whole thing. That is so true because policy, we've had this conversation around how local policy is.
Yeah.
Because the federal government, the national, you listen to the national news, they're talking about in general.
Yeah.
And then you miss what happens even in your own state and why that's important. And so today we're here, and reparations is a good example.
Correct.
Of that, is that we hear a national conversation around reparations, but then at the same time, California was doing something around reparations. And there's been some wins and some not so wins. Not so, we just didn't win on some things. What would you recommend to this upcoming generation of the 35 percenters?
Yeah, 1835, yep.
What would you recommend to them? Like some of us have those 35 percenters. I have two of them. You have one of them.
Yeah.
I know my sons, have been raised to vote, and they know how to vote. But what would you say to a parent of particularly a black woman who has and a father who actually has a young 35 percenter? What would you recommend to them to really get their kids to understand the importance of voting? Because we grew up in our generation of X with liberties that they no longer have.
Correct. So, I always try to paint them a historical picture, and that's look at what people have went through for your right to vote. You got people that were Faneuil Hamer, who was beaten. You got part of the MLK why he was taken out of here. You got the Honorable Marcus Garvey. You got Malcolm X. You got Medgar Evers. These people who put it on the line so you could go vote. I said, so you have to really take advantage of what we fought for. And as you vote, and not just vote, but get involved. See, voting is just your access to complain. But once you vote, how are you getting involved? And you need to do that because if you want this world your city to be better for you and your Jersey to come after you, you got to vote.
Yeah, because those potholes don't go away.
They don't go away on their
own. Without you telling them you got potholes on your street.
Yeah.
You give a lot of these historical, phenomenal individuals, but the reality is they think that's too far back. And they may not be able to connect with Martin Luther King or a Fannie Lou. Yeah. How do you bring it about today?
Well, look, we're not too far from the crime bill and how, because of voting, and how California utilized that for 3 strikes and increased our prison populations, tripled the number. They went way up. So that's all voting. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's all voting. It's if your city is like the potholes, if you got trash all along the 110 freeway, the 10 freeway, that is your politicians not cleaning it up. If your schools are bad, that's your school board. You know what I mean? If you have certain parks in your counties that are not taken care of, that's your county supervisor. And if you want to improve these things, you have to engage politicians and hold them accountable for what they said they're gonna, what they asked for your vote. So being involved in politics is not only good for you as an individual, it's good for your city in general.
And so now, okay, so we're now voting. And then what happens after we vote?
Yeah. So then we vote. They've made campaign promises to us. So now it's our responsibility to call them and say, hey, you said you were going to do that. And this is where black men actually fail. Because we all say that, oh, these people are running our neighborhoods and they're not doing anything. Okay, so what are you doing? That's where the personal responsibility comes is, does my mayor know my name? How many times have I called him? How many meetings have I showed up to? What about my city councilman? Am I knocking on their doors? Am I galvanizing and say, hey, look, I got a movement here, and if you don't fix these potholes, you out of here. And going to them and voicing our concerns, and we're not doing it.
Right.
We're sitting around complaining and not doing anything. So we have to be more active.
So you mentioned like a couple of places, barbershops in the community. Where else can we create safe spaces for black men to hear all of this information?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think definitely town halls are very important, coming into the communities where they are. Safe spaces, just you can do social media. You can actually do, since the majority of young black men are on Instagram and the TikToks, and black boys are spending more time on these social media sites than any other race, then you need to be on there doing shows. You know, just like you have algorithms that market. If you go on Nordstrom's and buy some shoes,
Which I do.
do you do right?
Which I do.
So they have this 1835 population they know lives in California. They can market to them and get them and speak to them through social media. They're not really doing that.
Well, and I just heard recently, even like the gaming platform, there's a gaming
platform,
streaming thing, and that they do ads there and they
Yep.
do stuff. And so so these young folks that are on these, like my oldest son who loves gaming, right?
Yep,
That
yep.
there's all these new tools and everything. And you have really owned that space, and you go out and you stream. To my dismay, you go out there and you pop up everywhere. Like you
Yeah.
pop up. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you are, you'll pop up. And so what is that? Like, explain that, and why is that important for black men like yourself to participate in this virtual world?
Yeah, this
That
social media.
Yeah, that like I just, because
Yeah.
when you say
It's
social
giga
media to
yoga.
me,
Yeah.
I think Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I post all the time in Facebook, but that's not
So-
what you're doing.
Everything we know about marketing, everything we know about messaging is reach, right? And you want to have as much impact that you can possibly get in the shortest amount of time, because people have very short attention spans. So the way to reach people is through TikTok. That's where they're at. You want your message to pop up on every algorithm. You want to pop up on every mainstream social media site that you can, because that's going to get into people's minds, get into people's get on their stream. And when people hear messaging over and over again, they start to buy into it. Look at our current situation.
Right. So if we have these messages around black men that we need you to be active participants in this process,
In voting,
we
yep.
need to go and get out the vote. We need to go to TikTok, and we need to go to, what was the other one?
You go to Instagram. They do
Instagram.
Snapchat. I don't do Snapchat.
Snapchat,
But I would say
right.
if you Instagram and TikTok, you in the game.
When I'm
YouTube
in the game,
as well.
right. So
Yeah.
Facebook is not in the game.
No.
No.
You so old school.
I am old school,
Yeah,
and I
Facebook
love
ain't-
being old school
Yeah.
too. But well,
Yeah.
listen, Mr. Harrison, I really appreciate you being here and doing this
I thank you so
show.
much
We
for
have to
having
do
me.
this more often.
We do.
I think that people need to see, like I said, some people assume
Yeah.
that because I'm so pro black women and girls that I'm not also pro black men and boys.
Well,
And
you are.
I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing some of the knowledge that you have. So
Yeah.
thank you.
No, I thank you for letting me on the show. I mean, listen, your impact in my life has been second to none. I mean, everybody knows that the Kingdomhood and where Richard gets his confidence from, and his solidness, who he is as a man.
Calling yourself Richard.
In third person. No, people talk about me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So where I get it from is from you. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that.
Seeing you work and your support.
Yes. No, well, that's what we do. We help brothers just like we help everybody else. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow, wasn't that great? I hope you enjoyed the episode and you found it empowering. You can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Also, you can find out more information about the California Black Women's Collective Empowerment Institute at www.cablackwomen'scollective.org. See you next time.